Hello and welcome. My name is Richard Bottery. I head the UKTI Trade Development Team based here in the British Embassy in Tokyo and also the Consulate General in Osaka. We're really delighted that you could join us for this webinar today on Japanese consumer behaviour. Thanks so much for taking time out of your schedule. I'm absolutely confident we're going to get some good insights because we've got a great guest. So Salim Darrenville, here to my left, has literally been in this sort of space for about the past 30 years. I
That's right.
won't name the exact year, but
Yeah.
Worked in all sorts of areas. I'll probably just hand over to him and we'll hear a little bit more about where that was.
Yes. Good evening or good morning to you all back there at home. Yes, Salim Darrenville. I started with Japan in the late 70s, came over here, worked with a British company, fell in love with the country, absolutely fell in love with it, and I believe Paul Smith came out at about the same time. And I just chipped away at this country, eventually working for a Japanese importer and then working as an export promoter with UKTI, and then eventually coming to work for a Japanese company over here for the last 13 years now. I enjoyed every minute of it, and I'm still learning, and there's still a lot of opportunities in Japan. So I hope today we'll be able to sort of explore some of those areas. But I'd like to say that I could take a week talking about this, and I'm sure we could. So we'll try and condense it within that hour. But I'm always happy to talk to whoever afterwards by email, Skype, and when you come over to Japan.
Okay, without further ado, I'm going to hand over to Steve. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Yes, I've chosen my slides. Again, it was very difficult for me to try and condense what I know and what I feel about Japan. I have a passion for Japan. So hopefully you can get a good feeling of what I've experienced, and I hope it'll rub off onto you. My first slide are opportunities in Japan. I put this together to show the two extremes of Japan. You've got the beauty of Mount Fuji, the cherry blossom, and the very traditional buildings, and then you've got the Shibuya 109, Ginza, the lights, and the total modern technology and the concrete of Tokyo. So it's just an interesting, and do keep that in mind, Japan does have two extremes. Basic statistics, I won't go into depth of the statistics of Japan. You can look it up on the internet. The British Embassy here will certainly have quite a bit to help you to understand Japan. But I'm going to give you some basic statistics that were, highlighted to me by a Japanese person who lived in London, came back to Japan, and in conversation, he just pointed out these little details. Japan is the size of the UK. Population, 127 million in Japan, about 70 million in the UK. A lot of similarities, royal family, island, country, etc., etc. One of the things that was actually mentioned to me was that the business corridor of Japan is from Tokyo to, say, Osaka. So you've got Tokyo, Nagoya, Osaka. If you can imagine 127 million people, maybe 50-60% of Japan is in that corridor. So if you look at the United Kingdom, 70 million population, you put them between London and Bournemouth, Southampton, that's Japan. That's how intense it is for business in that particular corridor. So that's really important for when you do come to Japan to understand Tokyo, Yokohama, Nagoya and Osaka. That is the bulk of the business, so to speak. And then, of course, there are other parts of Japan, but the bulk will be in that corridor. So that was very important to get across. The other one that was highlighted to me very quickly was Yokohama is the second largest city of Japan, in Japan after Tokyo. So imagine London is the largest city and Croydon, the second largest city, say in the UK. So that's Yokohama also is a very important city to Tokyo. So never forget Yokohama, don't discount it. It's also very important with Nagoya and Osaka amongst Tokyo for doing business. Basic business and social culture. We here in Japan, business cards are important. I would ask if you can carry a business card holder. Don't just take it out of your pocket, out of your shirt pocket or jacket pocket. Do have a card holder and do use it, because for Japanese the card is part of them and you're giving respect to them by putting it into a little folder. I can't say that enough. I've done it. I've been guilty of doing it, like escaping out, leaving the house, forgetting to take my business cards. I maybe had some in my jacket pocket, and I've had my legs wrapped, slapped by my dear wife, who is Japanese. So, and that's, you know, after all these years in Japan. So really do take care about that, and be respectful in that sense. Okay, so that's my basic statistics. Why Japan? Captive audience. You know, the population, huge population. Nation of shoppers. We're a nation of shopkeepers. They're a nation of shoppers. They love their shopping. Again, if I can give you an example, at a weekend, normally we Brits would go away for the weekend, go to the countryside. My wife and I, about a year and a half ago, I was planning to go to Gotemba, etc., to Hakone. And she said, no, we're going to Ginza. I said, why? She says, no, we're going shopping. It's Saturday. That's my spare time. That's my relaxing time. And I couldn't believe it. So since then, I've discovered they do love their shopping. They do like going out and shopping. Disposable culture. I say disposable culture because they buy clothes and they do dispose of it after a certain period of time. If they buy a Louis Vuitton bag, 3-4 years later, they'll buy another one, you know, and another one and another one. I work in the men's fashion industry. We do a certain amount of ladies. A white shirt. The salary man or the businessman changes his white shirt every 3 months. Maximum he'll keep it is 3 months from our experience in the stores. So they do like buying over and over again, or if they go out to restaurants, eating, changing. So that's really important to understand in the Japanese business culture. New experiences. Japanese love something new. So they do look out for new experiences. I say experiences. Shopping, buying clothes, wearing clothes is a new experience. Going to a restaurant is a new experience. So that's very, very important as well within that sort of Japanese culture. Competitive market. Very, very competitive in retail. I've put some names on the slides. United Arrows is a Japanese company with many sub-brands. H&M, huge, growing rapidly. Zara, also growing rapidly in Japan. Forever 21, and Parco. Parco is a young people's shopping mall, shopping centre in town centres with lots of little brands, Japanese brands as well as European brands, and they're all doing very, very well. And I put the little badge of Itochu because Itochu also act as master licenses for Paul Smith, Vivienne Westwood, Lond Van, many other brands, and they're always looking at new brands. Ron Herman is the latest that's been added to their stable. So a competitive market in retail, but the opportunities still exist. They are there. And if you understand the Japanese market, you can still get in. H&M, Zara, Forever 21, several years ago, didn't exist in Japan. They're here and they're growing. So they discovered the opportunities. I didn't put in Topshop, Topman, but they're also here in Japan and also growing. So they are there. The opportunities are there. Basic rules of success for Western brands. You've got to be a brand in Japan, however small or big you are. It doesn't matter. The Japanese, if they're going to buy a Western brand, British brand, Italian, French, American, it's got to be a brand. To create this brand and information of this brand, show it in your profile. That information of your education, if you're educated at an art school, an art college, or went to a certain university, that in itself is also a brand to the Japanese. You're selling yourself and your company profile to create that brand. So if you're a startup, it's not a problem. It can be created. Japanese like to understand and feel and see that of yourself as a brand. And then market those points to the Japanese in whatever way, through your website, through your retailing. Obviously there's a diverse set of companies here, and we can talk about how you can work on that. And then promotion. Promote yourself through your sector of that particular, as yourself as a brand. I've put three pictures on the slide there. Paul Smith, Vivienne Westwood, Stella McCartney. Paul Smith, he's famous in Japan. Maybe 70% of his business is Japan. Vivienne Westwood, I would say, probably nearly as much again in Japan. And Stella McCartney is growing rapidly in Japan. And again, they are big brands, but Paul started, with his 2 suitcases, traveling to Japan on his missions. So it can be done, and it's possible. So just understanding how to promote yourself in the Japanese market. I've put in this slide of magazines just to show when you are in Japan, please do go to a bookshop and have a look at the magazines. The magazines are basically 100% advertising. Even the editorial has to be paid for. It's very important to understand that. And then if you open the magazines, they look like a mail order catalogue. Besides some couple of glossy pages, most of it is like a mail order catalogue, because the magazines have to sell, and for them to attract their customers who are actually advertising in there, the customers or the stores want to sell their products. So they put it in a very mail order format. And another reason for this is that the Japanese consumer likes to check their products. They like to read about their products. So these magazines do write about the products, even though they are advertorial. That branding of the product is written in the space in the magazine. So they will talk about the product, or who the product was designed by, or who the company is, etc., etc. So it's very, very important. And using that, how can I say, template, that setup, even if you go into e-retailing, use that template for Japan. It does work, because the company I work for, we do that. We advertise, we're in magazines, and we also e-retail, and we have a homepage. So it is very important to study those magazines and understand, and you will understand the culture of the consumers through those magazines, albeit that you're looking at pictures and not reading the writing, but it does give you a very good visual information. Coming into the market, entry levels into Japan, e-retailing, I've put it in that order. E-retailing is could be the first way. Importers, distributors, directly to select shops. Select shops in Japan are independent stores who buy different types of brands from all over the world, including making their own brands in Japan or in China or wherever. Licensing is licensing your name, your company, to a trading house who will then work with you very closely. Joint ventures will be the next step, where maybe the trading house, you could say, we want to have a joint venture, as Paul Smith did. And you have shareholding in a limited company in Japan of your brand. And then direct investment, which is you come in directly and have your own office and your own backroom staff and logistics, etc., etc. So maybe as your company's growing, that would be the order to look at. I would never, as your brand is growing, I would never stick to one. I would move on, and I would say the aim is to go for direct investment at the end of the day. But joint venture is probably where you could stop, working your way as your business grows over the years. Aim for that sort of structure. And I've seen quite a bit of it, and have experience, and have a lot of friends who've worked their way through and come up to that level. Most of them have stopped at joint ventures, but a very, very profitable business. Consumer demands, very important in Japan, really, really important. Japanese, the quality of the products have got to be second to none for them. If I don't mind, I'd like to use Burberry. No disrespect to Burberry and Christopher Bailey, good friend. Burberry, when they were at Sanyo Shokai, I think they had a problem 5, 6, 7 years ago with manufacturing their raincoats in the UK. They manufactured some in Japan. They were so good that Burberry UK had to get themselves up to the same standard as the Japanese production. So that's the sort of level that Japanese work at. It is got to be 100% perfect. Every stitch, and they will take their little tape measure out and count if you say 10 stitches to the inch, they will count the stitches to the inch all the way down the jacket. And if it's 9 stitches to the inch, it's not perfect. So Japanese are very, very fussy in their products. In whatever you're involved in retail, whether it be food and drink, consumer goods, it's very, very important. Price points, I can talk a lot about that. In the fashion side, there are levels of price points that you can work at, retail price points. Select shops or brands have a limit for price points in the products. So whether it be a shirt, trousers, jackets, socks, shoes, you cannot sell it over a certain limit. If it goes over a certain limit, it then becomes a super brand. You're then going into the realms of Prada, Gucci, and whoever. So the Japanese retail market starts at supermarkets. So as we do at home, we've got Tesco's, Asda's, George. So in Japan, we have the same level supermarkets, then go into shopping malls to retail shopping structures in towns like Parco or Marui, and then you go into department stores, and then from department stores to the high street. And there are pricing structures that you can't move. So if you're selling to a supermarket, there is a maximum price that you can sell a shirt for or a jacket. If you're selling it to a retail store, a select store, it's higher, but there is a maximum point up until you get to the super brands, and then they have their pricing structure, which is ad infinitum. So those price points are very important when you're coming to Japan to understand your product, what you're producing, look at where you feel you should be in the market, and then look at those price points, and you have to really work hard to be in there. If you're going to end up, your price point is going to be at the same level as Prada or Gucci, then you've got to raise your company level to Prada and Gucci. Otherwise, they're going to win. The customer will say, well, if I pay 20,000 yen for a shirt with this particular company, I can go to Prada and pay 20,000. I've bought the brand. So it's really important to study those points. I always say limited editions. Whatever your product, you're creating products, consumer products for Japan. The Japanese love limited editions. They love something that's rare, something that's a collector's item. All the more reason to go and buy. It's another way, it's a marketing project, marketing plan to get them to buy into that product. And for them to feel good that product is probably the only one, you can't buy it anywhere else in the world. I've got this product and it's mine. And I know Louis Vuitton, Coach, and Gucci do that. There are Omotesando collections with a stamp in a bag that says Omotesando, and you can't buy it anywhere else in the world. From Louis Vuitton, you can only buy it in certain stores in Japan, and they have queues. When that product is being launched, there are queues outside the store for it. So it's creating brand loyalty, getting your customer back, and then giving them something a little bit different to what they can buy in the rest of the world. So yeah, always look at limited editions, very important. Communication and services. Again, I've worked with brands, British brands who've come over to Japan, who've come independently to Japan through importers, licensing, and they've come back to me and said, Salim, we've got a problem. We're not working very well with our partner or our license business. We don't know, we're not getting the same fees or the same investment as we had a few years ago. And invariably, when I've looked into the companies and spoken to the Japanese partners from the British point of view, and it all comes back down to communication and services. Not enough communication and understanding about how that product is sold in the store, and the sort of service they would expect from the designer. I don't mind mentioning it now. Patrick Cox was one of them. We did work for him for 4 months. Isetan had the license for Patrick Cox, £60 million business, slowly dwindling down. I think it dropped down to about £15 million turnover in a year, and Isetan stopped. They cut. That was it. It was the end of the day. They just stopped. For cut a long story short, Patrick Cox got hold of me here. We went into contract. We then looked into it, spoke to Isetan. At that time, the head of the menswear was a guy called Onish-san, who's now the president of Isetan Mitsukoshi Holdings. And we took him out for lunch to the Park Hyatt, and we sat down and he explained to us why. And it came back to communication and giving time to that brand, trunk shows, turning up in Japan, being pleasant to the customers. The Isetan have trunk shows twice a year, and they expect the designers to come. They will help a little bit financially, but they do expect them to come over, and the business is phenomenal. So as I said, £60 million in its height, down to 15, and 15 million wasn't enough for them, and it was important for them to try and get it back to 60. So I'm throwing some figures here, which are, it's open knowledge now. So a good example, and I know Patrick's now the creative director at Geox, and I really do hope he can come back again as a good British brand. So that was one example. So really important, communication services. When you do visit Japan, Japanese, it's a gift culture. I think I mentioned it in one of my other slides. Do give them a little present, whatever you bring over. It doesn't have to be expensive. Japanese, I've been given gifts by Japanese, green tea, and they give it to you apologising that it's a really small, non-expensive little present, and they do. That's not a problem. You can do the same to them. Whatever you give to them, they appreciate it. They really appreciate it because you're giving them time and understanding their culture. So it's very important to get their confidence and their love, so to speak. Purchasing habits, said nation of shoppers. They love going out and they love buying consumer goods. So it's got to be branded in some form where I'm sort of just doubling up on where I was earlier on. So, and we can talk about this a little bit later in our question and answers or as we go along. For me, this is one of the most important slides. I haven't put any graphics on it. I've kept it clear, and it is very important to study for you to be successful in Japan. Japanese lifestyle, working environment. Japanese will live 1 or 2 hours away from their workspace. If they work in Tokyo, they probably live in the outskirts or in the suburbs, maybe even Yokohama. It can take them an hour to commute into town, maybe even more, hour and 20 minutes to get to work. They don't have time to go home and change, get dressed and then come back out again. So normally, from the minute they leave home to when they get back home, will be their working life and their social life will be rolled into one, whether it be lunch or an evening after work. They do have a lot of, meetings and entertainment meetings after work. So they do go out in the evenings. They will go drinking with their friends, with their customers, and the relationship and the networking continues. So that's very important in a Japanese working environment. So if you are doing work with the Japanese and you are over here in Japan, expect to go out and have a networking session. And these networking sessions, I think, very similar to the Italians. When I worked with the Italians, it was always at lunchtime, at dinner time, weekends, that we got to know each other. And this getting to know each other creates a bonding for you and your company to work with them in Japan. So if your products aren't the best in the world. It doesn't matter if they like you and you like them. They will work hard with you to bring your products to Japan and then develop it to where it should be. And a good example is Watanabe Sangyo, who has Lavenum. When Lavenum first came, a very cheap jacket made in Suffolk, it's now a designer product in Japan. And he worked with Lavenum, and he got on well with them, and he worked and developed that up. So it's really, really important to understand the Japanese working environment and the way they work, and how you should work with them when you are in Japan, when you do give them time. Free time for the Japanese, as said earlier on, is going out and shopping. So understand that. And, they do have wives, families, children, and so on. And sometimes the families, if you become very friendly with them, you will get invited to their homes, to their barbecues. Yes, embrace that and understand and learn about Japanese lifestyle and their culture. Holidays, Japanese don't have holidays as we have, 2-3 weeks in the summer, even up to a month. Japanese holidays are maybe maximum 4 days. But Japanese companies are quite benevolent. If they have 4 days in a week, a Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, they'll probably tell their staff, all right, you can have Thursday and Friday off, come back to work on Monday. So they will get a block of a week. They tend to be odd days in a year. They have more, bank holidays in a year than we will ever do in the West. And those bank holidays will probably add up to 3 weeks as we would have as a full holiday in Europe. So their holidays are very scattered. So you can imagine their whole life is around working and living, and those holidays are snatched in long weekends. So as a consumer market, they can't travel very far as a family, to Europe. So they will go away to wherever, and they will be shopping and enjoying themselves. A lot of the wives won't sit on the beach and have a suntan, swimming. They do, and I do experience it with my own family. We'll go out shopping, eating, and just enjoying, whether it's up in the mountains at Hakone, and just enjoying the culture, the Japanese culture. And hence I put that slide in of the 2 geisha girls in Kyoto, because that is Japan, and their roots are there, and they will go back to it. So do appreciate and understand that to working with your hosts in Japan. Disposable income, yes, Japanese, the children, the kids, and I put female parasites, I should have put that in inverted commas because that's quite rude to say parasites, but it's a term that's used here. A lot of the Japanese girls, and I know in our family, my wife's sister still lives at home. She's 40 years old, works for Nagoya Television Company, has a very good wage, an amazing savings account, and they still live at home and they still go out and enjoy themselves. She will fly to Europe for 4 days for a holiday. So she has got a huge disposable income, and there are many, many girls like her. And then you've got an aging population who has a disposable income, and a good savings account and a very good pension. So you have lots of extremes, and then you've got the children where the grandparents we say the children have 5 pockets. So the grandparents, 2 sets of grandparents, are also giving a lot of income, a lot of money to the children to go out and spend. And when I say children, I don't necessarily mean 6-year-olds, 5-year-olds. I'm talking about 15, 18, 20 university children. Even they've had their first job, into their first job as recruits, do have an income from their grandparents. So there is a lot of disposable income, and there's a lot of savings in Japan. Japan doesn't have a financial problem as we all have in the West, so to speak. So it is cash rich. So there is income there, but they're very careful how they spend it. New families, there are quite a few, and we have it throughout where I work, where young boys and girls met up, got married, and have their first kid. Probably have 1 or 2 children maximum. They've been used to buying super brands, very expensive brands, but they can't afford to because they've got a child. So they're buying good brands from United Arrows, Tomorrowland, to give some examples. And they will go out, still wine and dine, but probably not at the sort of very top-end gourmet restaurants in hotels like your Gordon Ramsay and so on. But they will eat well. So they're very important, and that's a population that's growing. Japan's trying to increase its population, so there is an area there. And then an aging population, as you've all read about, and it's getting very, very big. And there is a lot of disposable income there. They do dress, they do eat, they love their cameras, and they do go out travelling and on holiday. They're not held to the companies, they are free. So there's a market there for whatever you're doing, you're coming into Japan. A very quick summary. Understand the business and lifestyle culture in this changing society. We could talk about that. Every point we could talk about this for hours. Promote yourself as a brand. Very, very important. Inspire the Japanese and be inspired by them. So do inspire them with your products, your lifestyle, your goods, your country, but also be inspired by them. For what they have in their life and their culture. And I think you will be inspired and they will be inspired, and there will be a good trade-off and eventually a good business. You've got to give yourself time in Japan. I've been here 30 years. Love every minute of it. Wouldn't give it up for the world. And it needs time, and it does pay off. I've mentioned Paul Smith, Stella McCartney, Vivienne Westwood, and there are many, many more others who do give them time, and it is paying off for them. Smaller brands. Timothy Everest is one of them. I worked with him. He's doing very, very well here. Richard James. So once you're in, do give them time, and it will pay off.
Salim, thank you so much. Your passion for the country and, of course, your experience in this industry is very evident. So, it's very clear that branding is absolutely critical in what you're saying. Could you just give us a bit of a flavour about what brand UK means in Japan? You're saying that sort of unique design is important. What is there anything that people on the line might be able to leverage out of Britishness?
One of the things that I've learned by living in Japan, and I work for a Japanese company, is creativity. The Japanese education system does not allow creativity. When they go to school, they don't have creative courses, a creative school as we do. They don't have university degrees for fashion designing, which is where I graduated. So they do have architecture and some other products, but product design, graphic design, fashion design is not of the same level, university degree level, as would be a lawyer or dentist or a doctor. So creativity is an area that's lacking in Japan. So Britain has a creativity. Whether you've been to an art college or not, it doesn't matter. It's in our blood from our education, from the day we go to school. Creativity is there in our way of education. It's a very creative way of educating us. So this creativity put into your products is your branding. So again, without knowing who the particular companies are here, but if I can give an example where I work in this particular company, it's a Japanese company, I'm the creative director. I created a brand which is based on London. Our changing rooms, for example, I've got names: Oxford Street, Liverpool Street. We've put paintings and pictures of those areas in the changing room. So when they go in and change, try on a suit, they're walking into Liverpool Street and there's a picture of Liverpool Street, etc., etc. So that creative thinking in my environment, for where I'm working in a Japanese company, they loved it. They couldn't think of it in a million years. So that's fantastic. And they've now adapted it right across 170 stores. So creative thinking in whatever you're doing is your branding in your product. So whether it's a technical or marketing or graphics, put that in and create your own image.
And for companies that may be just beginning on a sort of export journey, which is perhaps quite a few of our viewers. I wonder if you could just help us untangle this luxury versus quality thing, because the sort of cliche in the UK about Japanese buyers is probably around the Louis Vuitton in fashion, or maybe Fortnum and Mason in food and drink, that it's very much about sort of badge of ownership. But then when you talked about the different price points in all of these select shops and elsewhere in supermarkets, it sort of suggests that there's a much more diverse range there. How do quality and price, how does it all fit together?
Well, quality and price. I've actually made a note here, and I wanted to bring it up, and this is a good time to highlight a point. Louis Vuitton, you mentioned Louis Vuitton. 40% of their business in the world is Japanese. Used to be 52%. It's dropped down, and apparently the Chinese are picking up again. 1 in 5 Japanese girl carries a Louis Vuitton bag, and even my wife is carrying a Louis Vuitton bag, much to my disgust. Anyhow, the average. So the CFO of Louis Vuitton in Japan used to be a guy called Roger Finney, a Scotsman. I got to know him very well because my office was right next to theirs, and we met up on a Burns night and through various events. And he gave me some figures which aren't published, and he said Louis Vuitton had spent a fortune on research on their brand in Japan, and that's where they found 1 in 5 girls carry a Louis Vuitton bag. But the average wage of the girl who carries a Louis Vuitton bag was 2.5 million yen, was the average wage. So that's £15,000 was the average wage, and the bag would probably cost about £300 or £400. And that would be minimum, maybe £800 for a bag. So the girl who was buying a Louis Vuitton bag wasn't a very, very wealthy girl. It was an average working girl, salary girl. And they found out, and they interviewed quite a few, and they said the reason why they bought it was because of the brand history and the quality, the details and the quality of the bag. So we all know that at Louis Vuitton, the way they cut the patterns and so on, a lot of copies aren't the same, can be identified very, very quickly. So that's what the Japanese consumer loved about it, was knowing that detailing and that quality was that. Then the price didn't matter, and Louis Vuitton then obviously over the history and time have played on it and have increased their prices. And I've done a costing on a Louis Vuitton bag, having worked at Mulberry. It's about £40 or £50 to produce one at cost, with the leather and the plastic, if you like, for the bag. But it wasn't about that. It was about first the quality, and then obviously the marketing, promotion, and all the rest that goes with it. And that's why it became a profitable company. So that's an example that quality and price doesn't necessarily have to be together, but you can, through every structure of the price point, you need to have quality. But as the business grows, you can step up to the next level.
So we're sort of talking about proportionate quality, because, I mean, it is sort of confusing for people when they come here that you see quite a lot of 100 yen shops, which is not even like Poundland, that's like 50 pence shops in the UK. And yet, when you go in there, the little plastic trinkets seem to be sort of, quite good. I mean, is the conclusion from that at each of these price points you've got to be very much sort of in line with expectation, and if you go radically above or below that, then
you have a problem. Exactly, absolutely.
Right.
That's very important. So that's part of the Japanese buying and consumer culture that we have to understand. And I must admit, it took me the last 10 years to understand that. I'm not Japanese, but the Japanese already know that. It's sort of common knowledge to them. And then it's only through being married to a Japanese lady that when we go out shopping, that I began to learn and ask questions. And I find this is a short circuit information for us back at home, for when you do come to Japan, to understand that, to get in to your level.
If the companies watching already have some brand presence and values out in other markets, is that an issue that's then going to determine things like this price points in Japan, or is there a little bit more freedom to do something different in this market?
Well, again, I mentioned limited editions, and again, with companies I've consulted to in Japan and with the company I work with, we've created these limited editions to allow us to go off and increase the price or aim at another part of the sector that we're already in. So it's a way of stepping up for us.
Right.
You can't go if you're at the top, it's easy to go down, but from going, if you're at the bottom to try and go up is very difficult. So it's how to manoeuvre yourself in your services, your product going up. So yes, limited editions is why I mentioned one of the reasons.
So you talked about quite a lot of things that do work. What about if we issue some warnings? What doesn't work in the Japanese market? Have you seen brands come in and, let's focus particularly on the product as opposed to their sort of behaviour, because you were very clear about consumer service and so on. What products are unlikely to be successful here and why?
In consumer goods, I can't think of any products that really have had... Maybe if you are importing into Japan, especially in clothing, obviously sizing is important. There's an American brand at the moment in Shibuya, and on the door they say that the goods are imported and they're all to American specifications. And I got chatting to the manager there, and their sales aren't good. And I said, I'm not surprised, because you said it's all to American specifications, so the Japanese automatically assume it won't fit them.
Right.
So, specifications, and they probably doesn't. So it is important. I was in IKEA the other day. They're now producing furniture for Japanese people who are shorter in the leg. They are growing Japanese, don't get me wrong, but there are certain proportions, and the houses are smaller, rooms are smaller, so the furniture is being manufactured to smaller proportions. So it's important to study all those points of the Japanese life.
There's a related question from a particular company here, and that's about how do consumers and parents in particular react to new technology? Again, the cliche in the West is this sort of idea that Japanese are very experimental with technology, and it's all robots and automated ordering in restaurants and so forth. How does technology impact on the retail sector? Can you give us something?
Again, I can talk firsthand from the fashion point of view. The Japanese technology is second to none for their fabrics and their making. Uniqlo is a prime example with Heatech and Airism, the underwear that they've created. But if we're going to be, exporting from the UK, or Japanese going to be importing, they don't want to see that sort of technology in the goods. And as I said, first-hand at retail, the company I work with, we buy a lot of fabric from woolen mills in the Bradford and Yorkshire area. Thousands of metres. I think it was about 80 or 90,000 metres, as opposed to really super duper technical fabric that you could wear in the rain in Japan and so on. And that's not what they want. There is a market for that. That's Japanese.
Sorry to interrupt. What about away from fashion area? If a company watching has some innovation, I think this particular one is in relation to baby goods, and they have something, that is giving them a bit of a lead. Is there a kind of appetite in Japan to try new things, or concern about it?
Absolutely, I did see that earlier on. I want to know more about it because I've got 3 little kiddies. Japanese mothers, children, families, they're very into being organic, as I know from my wife and the kids. They're very concerned about everything that their children eat and wear. And since the tsunami, 3/11, and the radiation and so on, even more so the next generation that are coming through. So any new technology creative that's involved with children, with products, will be looked at and appreciated. Yes, in Japan, very much so.
So there's definitely a market for trying.
There is. I was involved with a company who was bringing in dog products into Japan, and I worked with her for a while, and she did very, very well, but she didn't give the time, and the service to the market, and they dropped her. And it was very, very expensive clothing. But
so back to the theme about the service side. So staying on the technological theme, a question here saying, how important is it to have a well-translated Japanese website? Are consumers buying directly from e-retail in the UK?
Yes, it's always good to have a well-translated Japanese website. It wouldn't do any harm. But if that's not possible, start off with part of a Japanese website. Part of your website in Japanese. So highlight some points. There are Japanese websites who will just highlight certain points in English and put it onto their website rather than the whole website being converted into different languages. But that's the ideal scenario, is to get to a fully translated Japanese website. But we don't expect, Japanese don't expect you to do that at first unless you're a very large company.
So what about payment methods? Because I think some people might have heard that there are kind of unusual cards like this JCB credit card and so on that are kind of unique to Japan. Is there anything?
No, but JCB I think is being accepted in Europe.
Okay.
You can. I've seen JCB in the UK. I think in Selfridges.
Right.
I've seen JCB being accepted, but Visa card it's not a problem. We did some work. I did some work with some designers and also product designers. They used PayPal. PayPal's accepted in Japan. It's not a problem, and it's a very good way of exchanging, paying. So, and PayPal have an office in Japan. So they Japanese can sign up to PayPal very easily through register their bank accounts.
Yeah.
We all have PayPals back at home, so it's also very easy. And Visa cards, not a problem at all.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you. There's a question that we just discussed very briefly before we started with the webinar, which is quite particular about a product, but I think illustrates a sort of wider point that we want to go through. So the question is about, is there a market for 9-carat gold jewellery in Japan, or is it better to aim for gold plating, lower price points and so on? You really sparked on that.
Yes, I did. When I saw that comment, that's exactly how you shouldn't be thinking for the Japanese market. If you're coming in and asking, is there room for a 9-carat gold? That's irrelevant to the Japanese consumer. They want to see the beauty of the product. If 9-carat gold is in there, great. If it's not in there, great. But it's the product and the design, the creativity of the product, whether it carries 9-carat gold or not. So it's very important what you're selling. But you can state that there's 9-carat gold in there as part of your branding, that we specialise in 9-carat gold, or this 9-carat gold is from wherever it is in the world. Build up on that as part of your branding of that product. But just coming in and saying, can we sell 9-carat gold? Maybe you can, maybe you can't. There might be Japanese producers here selling 9-carat gold and probably making beautiful products. So if you're going to be product to product, no.
But it is easy to appreciate that from the UK side, if you've heard about especially the sort of luxury aspect and quality aspect of the Japanese market, that maybe emphasis on materials is important. Yeah. But you're saying that the design aesthetic is the thing that's really going to sell that.
Yes.
And everything else sort of comes secondary.
Yes. The rest will fall into place behind that.
Yeah.
Because it's the product that's the most important. And it has 9-carat gold in it, so that's why it will be more expensive than costume jewellery or plating or whatever. So, build that into your branding, the 9-carat gold. But don't try and sell your products as, say, it is a 9-carat gold product. The product's more important than the 9-carat gold happens to be part of it, part of my branding.
How would companies get a feel for that, whether it sort of chimes with the Japanese consumer? Are there other ways that you can simply conduct research in this market, understand whether the product is going to work or not?
The internet, the website is certainly a good way. I know I don't speak Japanese, I don't write Japanese, and I've put in what I tend to do is go into yahoo.co.jp. So go into the Yahoo side of the search engine of the Japanese search engine of Yahoo, and I type in English something that I'm looking for, and invariably I'll get sites popping up Japanese sites where the word is obviously picked up, and it's probably in English somewhere along that site. And then through my research, and it'll be purely visual, I can pick up a lot of information.
Right.
And then if I want more, I will either print it out and try and get somebody to translate it for me.
Right.
To get me. So that's a good start.
So if you're getting sort of internet traces and price points,
Yes.
that's suggesting that there's demand is there.
Yeah, absolutely. I think so.
What if you come back with a negative on that? I mean, you have an innovative product like we referred to earlier, and you might not expect that it's out there. Is there any other way that you can sort of test a kind of hypothetical? Will this work or won't it work?
And again, I've had a lot of experiences with brands and designers, consumer goods coming into Japan where potential partners, or they're looking for partners, and there's always a resistance to immediately pick up on that particular product. And the reason for that is I've then since found out it's because they didn't understand the product. So they were just looking at it at face value. And at face value, it was just like any other product that they are aware of, that's either Japanese or European brand. So once they understand it, it's not a problem to pick up and to come into the market. So coming into the market doesn't necessarily have to be a failure in any way if you market it and brand it correctly. And you've then got to convince your potential partners and the opportunities here that this is the best product that they've ever seen.
So there's very strong central theme here around the sort of whole package around the products rather than just the thing itself.
Yes.
The values, the look of it.
Yes.
In fact, I think there's a video on our website where Sir Paul Smith, who you kindly introduced to us actually and helped facilitate that talk, where he talks about emphasising these key values, and if it's organic, keep saying it's organic. Don't assume that people know that. So
no, they don't.
Getting that message.
Assume, very much so.
Yeah.
And wrapping, packaging is also very important. So if you do sell anything to Japan, wrapping and packaging, box, very important because they have a gift-giving culture, and they expect that. You see it in the department stores when you buy something, you say it's a gift, they will go and wrap it up for you beautifully, absolutely beautifully.
Yes. We dealt with a lot of tea manufacturers at the food exhibition and annual trade fair here, and we had about 5 exhibitors, and they all told me this was the only market where if it wasn't cellophane wrapped, it's impossible to sell in Japan, even though it doesn't really impact on freshness at all.
Yes.
But it's all about that consumer experience of it.
That's right. Or what they expect to be the normal.
Tell us a little bit about trends, because again, another impression people might have about Japan is that there are booms of things go up, things go down. It's very sort of ephemeral. Again, perhaps if you could speak a little bit wider than fashion, although I know, of course, that's your main area of passion.
Trends. Japan. As we mentioned earlier on, Japan at its worst, economically speaking, is nowhere near, how can I say, as bad as say, maybe Britain at its best. So, Japan doesn't have a huge boom and a huge negativity. It tends to be on a fairly even line with minor bumps, ups and downs, but we don't have trends going too high and too low, right across the board of consumer goods, lifestyle, whether it be, from automotive, services and so on. When there was the hike of the VAT, the first week, first month, everybody probably held back a little bit, but we found in our industry, they all came back. There wasn't a problem. It wasn't high. It wasn't that high, and they accepted it. It was taken in. So
you can expect relatively stable sort of economic circumstances.
Yes.
And what about sort of the products themselves? Are there things that just suddenly take off and disappear, or is it a more sort of traditional market in that there are always categories of things people want? How does it all work?
There are products that do take off, and when they do take off, if they do disappear, they've only disappeared because of the lack of service to that particular product from outside Japan, whoever produced the products.
Right.
That came into Japan, it's taken off, but they haven't maintained, just take it for granted it will always run. And it doesn't always run, because the Japanese consumer, as I said earlier on and through my slides, do like a change. They like to see something a little bit different. And if it isn't different, it'll start, the Japanese consumers say, well, we bought it last time, it's the same product again, we don't want it. So you have to, whether it's the packaging, the graphics, whatever, maybe the core product doesn't change if it's tea, but the packaging will change. So it can grow, and it does grow. And when it does really shoot up, you've got to work. The exporters have to work very hard to make sure and maintain that level. How far it goes up, I don't know, but it won't always grow. But it will reach a level, and then you have to keep it at that level.
So a kind of viral effect, is possible.
Yes.
Yes. But you're saying for when you get into that established phase, that this sort of innovation behind it is. I mean, I guess my mind goes back to Paul Smith, where there is a sort of known entity and then a kind of subversion behind it, or a constant refreshing that works so well in Japan.
Very much.
Okay, I think there's probably time just to get really briefly to try and get through the last question that's come through on the iPad here. It's a pretty critical one, really. Do you believe that small brands, and in particular he's talking about fashion, with limited experience and limited budget can succeed in Japan? Or really should they be considering Japan a bit later down their journey, maybe break, France, Italy, whatever? What do you say?
They consider Japan. I think small brands, again, depending on the budget and their limitations. Look at the home market. You've got to be successful in the home market. If you're going to export to Japan, 9 times out of 10, most of the Japanese importers that I know, retailers, will always say, where is it selling in England? Where is it selling in London? And if I can't tell them it's in a store in Covent Garden, or it's in a department store, even if it's in the back end of Edinburgh or Glasgow, if I cannot pinpoint and show it somewhere, then they won't buy it.
Right.
So it is important, yes, to get your base at home, organised, sorted, make it visible. It doesn't have to be huge, but it's there, and then you can look at Japan. A small amount of business in Japan could probably be the equivalent of a huge amount of business in Italy or France.
Right.
So I would say Japan is, coming in small. I wouldn't discount it. Do look at it. And there's another part of Japan that is really important, maybe to the rest of Europe and the West, is the Japanese pay. If you sell anything to the Japanese, you deliver anything, they will pay on time. They will always pay. You never have to chase for your money, ever. It's not a case if you say 30 days it'll be in your bank account. 7 days it'll be in your bank account. And that in itself, for any developing brand in the West, cash flow is important. So Japanese is probably one of the best markets for cash flow.
Well, that sounds like a pretty positive note to end on. Maybe if I could literally allow you one sentence on the value of the yen. It's obviously changed quite considerably.
Yes.
1-2 sentences. What does that mean? What's going to happen?
That Japan is restructuring itself. It had to. Economically, because of everything that's happened since the tsunami and the expenses. But it's not bad, it's not expensive, even though the pound is stronger than the yen. It's still not out of reach. It's still 200 yen, 220. It's not out of reach for the Japanese consumer and the Japanese retailer. They can actually buy, because they know the value of the product is going to be worth more because it's being exported from the UK. So, not a problem.
Salim, thanks so much for
thank you very much.
Time with us today. I hope everybody enjoyed that. Please do follow us on our social media channels. You'll see the buttons on the Export to Japan website. We're on Twitter, Facebook, and also LinkedIn. Do click there if you enjoyed the webinar, and look for future content right here. So thanks again for listening. See you next time. Thanks, Salim.
Thank you very much.